Welcome back to another video in my SST tutorial series. This should be part 3 in the series where I'm going to finish deploying the Astro website that I created in the last video. So last time we left off with me running this website locally, and now I've deployed it to CloudFront and have it running in AWS. And looking here in the SST docs, because I'm using pnpm, it says that I should just need to run this command right here, pnpm sst deploy, in order to productionize the application and deploy it to the cloud. However, I did run into some issues when I was using this Astro site construct right here. So I did end up making a couple changes to the code from what was seen in the last video that I made. And while I was at it, I decided that if I was going to make a tutorial on deploying a website, then I might as well create a website for my YouTube channel. So I actually went ahead and did that, and now I have this API stack and a block stack, as well as this tutorial stack, which I'll get to in just a second. But this API stack, I actually ended up blowing it away, or I'm going to blow it away very soon. And that's because I decided to change it to this tutorial stack right here, and this tutorial stack has some of the changes that I ended up making. So if we come back here, I decided that we didn't really need this API thing, so I got rid of that. And then I also talked about this CORS thing right here. And my intuition was that if I put CORS true on here with this option, that it would put CORS headers on there and cause issues when I was trying to run stuff from localhost, and I didn't want to deal with that. However, when you set CORS true right here, what that actually does is it adds CORS headers, but it completely opens up the CORS policy so that it allows from any origin, allows any headers and any methods. So if you don't want to deal with CORS, then you actually want to set CORS true right here. Then I will also just get rid of that and clean up my imports. But the next thing that I ran into, and this seems to have broken from when I made my last video to when I started working on this video, just a couple days in between. And the issue that I had was when using the website to try to upload an image to the S3 bucket. And the weird thing is that I deployed this website to production right after I made the last video, and I didn't have any issues. But then when I was working on it just a day or two ago, I started running into these 403 errors that I was getting from trying to access objects from the S3 bucket. So if I come over here, and I already picked this moose picture that I used in the last video, which I guess I'll just pick that again. And then I clicked upload, and then I was redirected because if we look over here in this file, we can see that after this fetch API request is made, that we get this window.location.href to take us to the S3 URL for the object of the image that we just uploaded. But when that happened, I kept getting this access denied error, and it just happened all of a sudden. I don't know what I did. I don't think I changed anything, but this started to occur. But anyway, the thing that finally got it to work was by taking this ACL thing out of there. And ACL stands for Access Control List, and it's a setting that you can put on an S3 bucket to control who can read or write from a bucket. But this was just one of the pieces that I ended up tweaking in order to get this to work. So if I come in here and look at the buckets that I have a couple more, and I renamed them from dev SST to dev ICWN. Okay, but if I take a look at the bucket in question and come here to this section, then we can see that block public access is turned on for everything. And that would explain why I'm getting this access denied error when I'm trying to access an image in this images bucket. So if I come back over here and I'll click edit and uncheck that and save the changes, so then I'll say confirm. Then I should be able to edit this bucket policy to allow anyone to read objects in this bucket. However, I don't want to do this manually, so instead we're going to do it programmatically. And luckily, SST allows an escape hatch for most of these constructs so that you can access properties on the underlying CDK constructs. So I'm going to come here and say CDK, and then I'll say bucket, and then block public access. And this is going to take a block public access object. And inside here, I'll pass in some properties to basically make it so that anyone and everyone can access this bucket. So I'm just going to add these settings right here, and then that should automatically start deploying. Although while that's deploying, there is one other property that I wanted to add on here, which is public read access. Yep, right there. And it's a Boolean. I'm just going to set that to true. And after that update happens, you can see that block all public access is still turned off, which means that public access is not blocked. And then this bucket policy was added, which allows anyone to perform the S3 get object action on this resource or the bucket that we're currently looking at. And now if I come back over here and refresh the page, then it should work and we should be able to see whatever this image is. And there you go, I refreshed it and the content on the web page didn't change, but I did download a picture down here in the corner. If you can see it, I don't know if you'll be able to see it in the recording, but it happened. And just to double check that, I'm gonna refresh the page, come in here, choose a different image, why not, and then upload that. And this time it should just work. And there you go, it downloaded the image. But anyway, I already made these changes and put it in this different stack that I called the tutorial stack. And it's essentially the same thing, just with different names. So I'm gonna come here to my config and get rid of that because I don't want it anymore. And down here, we can see that it starts to deploy. However, it doesn't do anything with the stack that we just removed. And you can delete a stack from the command line. I think it would just be, in my case, pm SST remove, and then the name of the stack, which I don't remember what it is exactly because I have a really bad short-term memory. But if I come over here to the Cloud Console and look for that stack, it's going to be this one right here, and I can just delete the stack from here in the console. So I will go ahead and do that. And something else that I'll mention is when you delete a stack, there are some resources that are considered protected that you don't want to accidentally delete, such as like a database or an S3 bucket. And so when you delete a stack, there is a stack deletion policy in place that will prevent the S3 bucket from being deleted. So we actually have to come in here and do that manually. So the bucket that I want to get rid of is this images bucket right here. And we just first have to empty the bucket. And then once the bucket is deleted, then we can select it and hit delete. Copy and paste this. And now those resources are cleaned up. It is kind of annoying that there's that manual step that you have to take, but at the same time, when you have a production app, you really don't want to accidentally delete those resources. Anyways, with that out of the way, now I'm going to deploy our stacks to production. And to do that, I'm just going to do pm run deploy stage prod. And just in case you didn't catch it, you can override config values that you have in here. For instance, I have stage equals dev, so that the dev stage is the default stage. You can override any of these properties just by passing the command line flag that corresponds with the property. So for instance, here I wanted stage to be prod. Anyways, after it's deployed, you can see that I have two different stacks right here. I have my block stack and the tutorial stack, and they've both been deployed to CloudFront under their own URL. So if I click on the link for the tutorial stack website, it will take me to CloudFront and we'll just see this same page that we've been looking at this entire tutorial. However, I also have my blog stack, which if we look here in the file explorer, I added a new package called blog, and it's also an Astro application, but it's an entirely separate package. So if we look here at this blog stack, we can see that I'm pointing the path to the blog package that I created. And I'm also specifying these other options to tell STS what command to run to build the application, as well as the directory that the output will be in. And I also went and just decided to get ifcodingwerenatural.com and buy that domain name. It's only 12 bucks. But you might also notice that right here, I'm using static site instead of the Astro site construct. But first of all, let's just take a look at this website. So this is what it looks like with CloudFront. And of course I have a dark mode, and that's just because I copied a template that had dark mode in it, thankfully. But I don't know if you can see this on any like of your mobile phones, if you're watching this from your phone, but if I go to ifcodingwerenatural.com, then it takes me to the exact same website. And if you've ever had to set any of that stuff up manually, you have to go into Route 53 and you have to set up different records in order to point it to a CloudFront distribution. And like doing all that stuff manually is such a pain in the butt. But with this, just a couple lines of code, I was able to do all of that. And even though I ran into some issues with the tutorial website, overall, this has been a really nice experience. But now I want to explain why I'm using this static site right here for my Astro website instead of this Astro site construct like I am with the Astro website for the tutorial website? So to answer that question, we're going to take a look at a little architectural diagram here. So with this website, there's some dynamic content that's happening just with the URL, the signed URL that gets generated. So some server-side rendering has to happen in order to send the correct HTML to the client. So if we look at this diagram, what's happening is the browser makes a request that goes through CloudFront, and for any static assets that exist like CSS files or the favicon, I don't know, but that would go through the S3 bucket, and then it would just grab those static files out of the bucket and send it back to the client. In fact, if we take a look at this and inspect, I'll blow that up a little bit and come over here to sources, then you can see that we have this index.html file, which if you look at it, it's exactly what we have in the code. But then over here under CloudFront, there's this Astro file that has this index.css. So if I wanted to apply any other styles to it, then that file would be right in here, or at least under this folder. But for our index.html file, looking at this again, you can see that right here we have this action and there's this URL that gets generated. So in order to generate that URL, it can't be a static file, it has to be generated on the fly. And if we look at our code right here, we can see that that is what is happening on the server side. So this code right here, the creation of this URL right here, it has to happen somewhere server side. And this is actually bundled up inside of a Lambda function. I don't think I showed this, but here in our astro.config file, I had to add this import from astro SST and change output to server and add this AWS adapter. So if we come over here and look under dist, we can see that we have a client and server folder. And the server folder has this entry.mjs, and this entire file gets uploaded and put into a Lambda function. And it has some kind of wrapper in here that makes it so that this code works with Lambda. So for anything that is not a static asset and goes through server-side rendering, we'll go and hit a Lambda that has that server.js file in it. Or sorry, I guess I should have renamed this to entry.mjs. And we can go find that Lambda function, and it's going to be one of these guys. I'm guessing this server function. So we'll take a look at that. And after it loads, you can see that sure enough, we have a bunch of JavaScript right here inside our entry.mjs file. So that's how that is all set up. However, with my blog site, all the files that I create are actually just static files. And that's one of the unique propositions of Astro, is that it can just create a bunch of HTML and by default, there's no JavaScript sent to the browser. And I wanted to take advantage of that. And so I just went with the static site instead of the Astro site. And if you do use Astro site, then you actually have to use server-side rendering, but I didn't want any server-side rendering and my blog site didn't need any server-side rendering. So I just went with static site. And so when I'm looking at this ifcodingwerenatural.com website where I have like different posts and like, no one go look at this. This is just a place for me to just put random thoughts down and it'll probably make no sense to you. Really, it's just like for my own personal notes that I'm putting publicly on the internet. But all of these files are just static HTML files. So if we come look here at this diagram again, because everything is a static asset, this part right here just goes completely away. And we can also kind of see how this works just by looking inside of these different buckets. So this is the tutorial stack bucket where we have server-side rendering. And inside here, all we see is this favicon and this Astro folder that has this CSS file. And if we come back over here, we see that this is index.3b46, whatever. And right here, we can see the exact same file, 3b46, blah, blah, blah. So there's really not a lot in this bucket, and that's because most of the stuff is happening with server-side rendering. However, if we come back over here and look inside blog and look at this dist folder, we can see that there are quite a bit of files that get generated for this static site. And if we come and look at the bucket for the blog site, you can see that all the files that got generated over in the code, those exact same files exist right here. And so really all that's happening is there's a CloudFront distribution in front of all these files. And if you're not sure what CloudFront is, I don't think I mentioned that yet. CloudFront is basically just a CDN, and it caches files at the edge, and it makes it so that files exist somewhere on some like edge server closer to the people that are accessing the website or accessing the static files that exist in an S3 bucket. And that's part of what CloudFront does. And I guess we can just take a look at one of these. So looking at if coding were natural, you have these things called origins, and an origin just points to some original domain. In this case, it's just this S3 bucket. And then you have these behaviors that basically describe what routes should go to which origins. So the static website was probably a terrible example to look at. But if we look at this one, so this is for this website, we can see that we have two different origins. One of them is a bucket, an S3 bucket, and the other one, this points to a Lambda function, which once again, trying to keep you mobile viewers in mind. So this one points to a Lambda function. And if we look at our behaviors, we can see that we have this behavior where any path pattern that matches this is just going to go to the S3 bucket, same with this fav icon, but anything else is going to be redirected to this origin, which is going to take you to the Lambda function, which is going to generate the HTML to send back to the client. So I guess kind of long story short is if you only have static files that you want to serve to your client, which you can do with any front end, including React or Angular or Svelte, definitely Astro, then you can just create this static site rather than reaching for one of the other specialized constructs for one of the other front ends. And that's going to do it for this video. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about the topic that I'm most excited about, which is Live Lambda. And if there's one reason why you would want to use SST or switch from the serverless framework, or maybe just a plain AWS CDK application to SST, then Live Lambda would be that reason. And also, if you found this video helpful, I'd really appreciate giving it a thumbs up. And also, if you have any questions, ask it in the chat and I will do my best to respond to you. And with that, I hope to see you in the next one.